And, and welcome to another session of Write Club. And this one's a particularly important one where it's AMA, Ask Me Anything. It's, an up level to the Q&A, to the traditional Q&A, because you could just ask me absolutely everything and anything about publishing, framing your book, formatting, the Swift model that we've already talked about, storytelling, or how to start planning your author journey. Very often, the biggest thing that authors start to get held up with when they're starting to write their book is where it's going to go once it's finished, once it's published, and how to publish it. Traditional, hybrid, indie, DIY. What is the difference between all of these? And the biggest thing is should you, questions like, should you look to fictionalize your story? Should you not fictionalize your story? What are the rights? What are, who is telling? Should you tell it first person, third person? All those questions, ask me anything. And as you are thinking about these questions, and I know that some of you who are watching, obviously in the replay, might be thinking, well, how is anyone going to ask the exact question? Mine's a very particular question. Consider that all authors go through the same journey. So you'll hear some nuggets of gold in someone else's question that you will know was a question that was meant for you to have answered. So we're ready to go. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. That's the other thing. There is no such thing as the most minimal question you might think isn't relevant to anyone else. And when you ask it and hear the answer, you'll realize that it's probably relevant to everyone. There is a menu, a recipe. And while you can have different flavors, different spices coming into your personal journey, there's still a recipe. There are still some staples in every loaf of bread, or still some staples in every cake. When you're creating something, there's still a recipe to follow. And so with that, I'll open it up. Who would like to ask a question? Just unmute yourself and ask the question. And I know some people have had questions previously. So I got a question earlier today, and the question was, if I am, I'll look it up on my phone just so I get it correctly. If I'm going to write my story, so it's someone who's writing a narrative memoir, their own personal story, but there are people in it who may or may not want their stories told, who want to be revealed in part of the story. Should I tell that, or should I fictionalize my characters? So that's who here actually struggles with that. Who here relates to that question? Yeah. Oh, okay. Everyone's hand is up, or most people's hand. So that's a big one. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, has a little quip that she says, if you didn't want to be part of my story, you should have acted better. Which is sort of like, you have the right to tell your story exactly how it happened to you. If someone else doesn't like that part of the story, well, they have the right to tell their story, to write their own book. After all, you're writing your book, and your perspective may not be the true perspective or the right perspective according to them, but it's your perspective. And so while you're writing, you really need to ensure that you're staying true to what it is that is your story without being scared of what other people will say. Now, there's a caveat to that. I recognize that there are some stories that could be very hurtful, and hurtful to the people that you love, and you don't want to hurt them. And then you're weighing this guilty conscience, or this ethical dilemma of whether you have more of a right to that story if it's your story to tell. or if you should not tell your story to protect them. I always say, write from your scars, not from your wounds. So if you have an open wound that hasn't healed yet, you can write this story as your catharsis, as your way of letting the story air, letting it out. And possibly the writing of it will create some scar tissue over that wound and start to become a scar. It'll start to scab over to the point where it doesn't hurt anymore. You'll still see it there because you've lived life, and there is no life that comes without a certain amount of wounds and scars and stretch marks and wrinkles. And every wrinkle and every stretch mark and every scar tells the story of where you've been. But write the story from where you've been, not from where you are. You need to heal it before it can come out. That being said, as I'm saying, part of the healing is the writing. So the question is whether you publish it. If you're in this ethical dilemma, then I'd say hold off on publishing it. Write it, but hold off on publishing it. There's more power to tell the truth standing in the space of first person, your own story, than to fictionalize it and pretend it's not you. You know that joke of like someone posts on social media saying, asking for a friend? We all know it's not for a friend. We all know that that's a thinly veiled disguise. So there's no power in actually trying to fictionalize it. There's power in telling your story, and just know that you're going to tell your story at the right time. Now, the second question that always comes up is whether it's fictionalized or whether it remains in first person and you're telling the story, can you get sued? And so 100%, I mean, I am not a copyright lawyer, but I can tell you as far as copyright goes within writing your story, you cannot get sued because it's your story. The only time that you can get that there could possibly be some litigation is if you're slandering someone to the point that they're losing business or losing some sort of monetary that they can attribute directly to your book. If it's just that they're lost some reputation, if they've got some hurt feelings, if they're feeling like though you didn't paint them in the best light, there's nothing that can hold up in a court of law. It's only if you slander to the point that they have lost income, that they've lost some monetary value that they can actually put a price tag on. And even then, a great example, for instance, of where litigation and copyright doesn't ever hold up in court is in the story of the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. And of course, Dan Brown did all this research based on the factual stories or the philosophy, the idea that preceded him. And two of the authors who had written a book all about the premise of what the Da Vinci Code is, wrote about the Mary Magdalene line and the bloodline and the descendants of Jesus. And Dan Brown used that book as part of his research and then fictionalized this story of a modern day mystery adventure and murder and mayhem and created the Da Vinci Code from it. Now, when the authors of that factual book took him to court and said and pled their case that he in fact used their information, and in fact, so much so that Dan Brown had actually taken those two authors' names and created a fictional name of a professor that took the letters, was an anagram of those two authors' names. who had written it. The book was Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and he had taken the authors' names and written them into the Da Vinci Code. And they were trying to use it as proof that, hey, he's fictionalized our story. We're the rightful owners to this information. And the judge, of course, threw it out of court, saying factual books or books that are nonfiction are there to be referenced for fictional books. So there's no copyright infringement. He wasn't hiding anything. There's no slander. In fact, having written this fictional story of Da Vinci Code, in fact, drove the sales of the factual books around that topic. So they actually sold more. And when the judge actually handed the denial, sort of shut it down in court, the judge actually also created an anagram somehow to be witty and actually passed that judgment in an anagram and became really creative in literature for that too. So just goes to show that it doesn't matter at any time in court, a fictional story or a narrative story, the creator, the artist is always going to have the stronger leverage because you're just telling a story. You're just telling a story. So there's no worries about that. So does that answer that? Is there anything else to take that to the next level? Any fine tuning with that question? No. Okay, great. Any other questions? So I'm going to pull into the questions that I got asked today again. I have one, actually, and this is the most common one. What's the difference between traditional publishing and hybrid publishing, or what people are calling indie publishing? And so let me just give a reference to that. And I know that I talk about that quite a lot. So if you've heard this, listen in for some glimmers, some hints, some clues. There might be something in here that gets you to write today in a different way. Begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey said. So I believe that every single author, doesn't matter whether you're choosing to go with traditional publishing, hybrid, or independent. First of all, I think every author should write a book proposal, a book plan. Just like a business plan, you actually have very specific questions around who your target market is, who your reader is, what are the comparables in that niche, in that category, and who you are to tell this story. And the book plan is really great, a tool for you to be able to use that to write, whether you're going traditional or not. Now, here's this is the big rub. Traditional publishers do not take your money. They're built on a business framework that is that they make money from the sale of your books. So you're giving them a huge revenue, a huge percentage, a huge cut of the sale of your books, but you're not paying anything. That's traditional publishing. And I have other courses and other, my Self-Publishing Simplified talks about how that traditional publishing started and why it's print run and why, how it runs a little bit different, the history of that. But just for now, for you to know, a traditional publisher doesn't take your money. Their model is that they invest in your book. And because they're getting a big cut, they're invested in selling as many books as possible. Then we have the second tier, and those are called, they call themselves publishers, but really it falls under hybrid publisher, or I would prefer to call them self-publishing assistants, because they're using the exact same channels that a self-publisher would choose, but they're doing it for you. Now, there are a lot of benefits. If you're a one and done author and you're only looking to put out one book, this is a great tool to use because you're paying for all the services and you don't have to think of formatting and cover design and editing and strategy around marketing, and just let them do it. But if you're paying them in order to do that, and there are publishers in this space or hybrid publishers who provide this service in this space that charge very little, and there are ones that charge tens of thousands of dollars, and nothing gets me like ruffles my feathers more than when authors, first-time authors, end up with boxes and boxes and boxes of books sitting, gathering dust in their garage or in their basement or in a spare room somewhere because they've bought into one of these publishers who has sold them in tens and thousands of dollars, and then they have so many books that they don't move. This model of publishing, they do not pay you, you pay them. So their business model is to make money from the author, not from the sale of the books. Once they've received the money from the author, they have no incentive to sell more books. Their only incentive is to sell more books to the author, and then the author has to self-market them. As I said, there are good players in the market and there are bad players in the market of this. Not all hybrid publishers are the same. The third option is to do what I like to call DIY, true independent publishing. And that term gets thrown around. A lot of hybrid publishers will call themselves independent publishers, so it's hard to know. But true DIY style is that you actually publish your book and you put it onto KDP by yourself, which KDP is Kindle Direct Publishing, that's the Amazon branch of the publishing. Then you can just leave it there and have it as KDP Select, which is exclusivity, which Amazon gives you some incentives. Or you can also opt, my biggest recommendation, the best in the business, is Ingram Spark to do your distribution outside of Amazon. That is true DIY. Now, the downside to it is they don't provide you with your cover or your formatting or your editing. And that's where companies like my production company, Maverick Productions, Inc., come into play for your one-stop shop for all your book production needs. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A perfect end result comes to you, and you don't have to buy all the software, spend the time. You can just create the book and put it up yourself. And that is really the way that the market is trending right now, and depends on when you're watching this, of course, if you're watching in the replay. But what we're seeing right now is that that's going to become an ever increasing player in the market. And we're going to see quite a few shifts coming towards that, but I really see that more and more and more books are going to be success stories on the basis of that model, because it's really the model that has the most freedom and the most accessibility. Not to say that the traditional model, where the publisher pays you. There are so many stories right now of authors who have gone the DIY way, become viral successes, gotten a lot of traction, gotten picked up by the traditional publishers afterwards, or by movie houses and production studios to make it a movie. So just because you start in the DIY category doesn't mean that you can't move over to traditional afterwards. So I hope that makes sense. That was a little kind of laser dose of the traditional versus the DIY model of publishing. And let me see here. Anyone have any questions about that? Any further clarification? Great. I've got here, do you list your references, your sources, fact to fiction? So I guess this question is, so let's get into it from what I understand. First, fiction, you do not need to list your sources or your references. Fiction is fiction. Now, if you have quotes from famous people, you could even fictionalize that. You, of course, have a little caveat at the beginning of the page, at the beginning of the book, sorry, where the copyright is, that says something along the lines of, the story told within this pertains to fictionalized characters only. Any relevance or any resemblance to any characters, living or dead, is only for the purpose of entertainment, and it's not meant to portray reality. So fiction, you've got tabula rasa, green light to do whatever you want. So fact to fiction. So do you mind clarifying when you mean, do you mean a prescriptive nonfiction book.
Well, you mentioned Da Vinci's Code. So
Yeah.
you said the people took him to court, but
Yep.
he got most of his source information from their information that they had gathered. So,
Yeah.
so that's facts, historical facts. Same with
Right.
Outlander's historical facts, Titanic
Correct.
historical facts.
Exactly.
So that's what I mean. I guess because I'm a scientist in a technology,
Yeah.
I always list my references to where I got my information. So in those cases, do you list in the back of the book where you got the information?
No, for fiction, like I said, you don't need to list anything for fiction because you're telling a story. Now, you could even have historical facts that aren't necessarily true to the history books, and we've seen that quite often, where alternate histories are written, whether just for the sensationalism of being able to tell the story in a different way, like if this had happened this way, it would have gone this way, when we're retelling history, but never, there's no need to give credit or reference when you're writing fiction. As I said, from a legal perspective, you do put a little caveat right in the front of the book saying, it's fictionalized story, no resemblance to any characters are intentional with it, but whether it be true to life history or true to life, let's say factual or not, even in the case of Da Vinci Code, yes, he did base his research on factual books or books that were written as nonfiction books. We talked about that, prescriptive nonfiction or just nonfiction, historical nonfiction, philosophical nonfiction, theoretical nonfiction. Many people would argue that Holy Blood, Holy Grail is not true history. I mean, many people would say that's the authors of that book interpretation of all of the historical relevancies that had to do with that. But when you're writing fiction, it is absolutely never, there's not a need to credit or reference because you are only writing. Now, is it polite? Is it, recommended that in the acknowledgements page, if you have gotten inspiration from a single source or from a few singular sources that have really helped you build the backdrop of the story, does it suit that then in the acknowledgements page at the back of the book that you actually credit that? Yes, 100%. That is just polite, and it is just, well-mannered, and of course appreciation, gratitude towards those authors that came before, and they will obviously also much more appreciate that, and therefore maybe speak about your book because they're proud then that their book was used in reference to this great fictionalized book. But it doesn't need to be as a reference or as an endnote. Fiction is fiction.
I understand that, but what I was trying to say is, like, Titanic actually sank on its first voyage. That's history. The characters in the movie were fiction.
Exactly.
So you have a part of history, and then somebody's made up these characters.
Exactly.
So if you got the information, like, where you source the information of when the Titanic left, where all that other background information, do you make sure you source that part of it?
So things like that, like the Titanic, that's open source. I mean, anyone can find that for free on the internet. Things that might be a little bit more alternate thought for instance, like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, there's only a small section of books that would be writing that Dan Brown would have used to source that information. So that's why the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail could say, hey, that's, I mean, he definitely needed to reference us. As I said, that the judge nonetheless felt that they actually benefited from Dan Brown's writing of Da Vinci Code more so than they lost money. Like they didn't actually, there was no loss to them, monetary loss. So that being said, for instance, there's a show called The Man in the Glass Tower, I believe, on Netflix, which tells a whole alternate universe around what happens if the Allies would have lost in World War II. So many of the characters are true to history books. So many of the positions of the people and their, the way that the structures would have fallen, it made reference to, historically accurate. But while it was going here, then it turned this way and created a whole narrative over there. Fiction, you have free right to do all of that. So no need to reference. Like I said, in the acknowledge, if you have used 2 or 3 books to learn everything that you can, let's say you're writing Secret Life of Bees, for instance, which is a great book, but if you're writing about a bee colony and you use 2 or 3 books to learn everything that you can about what it is to raise bees, definitely put that in the acknowledgement page. Definitely put that in the acknowledgement page, but it doesn't mean, but you don't have to reference it. There's no legal implications that you use these books about how to grow your own bee colony. And you have to, I mean, as a fiction author, you have to learn, you have to do your research into the different things that your characters do, but you don't need to reference that for fiction. Now, if you're writing a memoir book, and for instance, you're writing a memoir book about, let's say, a medical journey that you were part of, that took place. And you're trying to prove a point that the medicine or the medical implications, the medical journey that you were given or that the loved one was given was incorrect, definitely put references. 100% then put references, because what you're doing is you're actually saying, you're being, let's say, kind of a whistleblower or revealing another side. That is not just your perspective, that you're actually standing on something saying, this has been falsely, false narrative, and I'm here to give the real narrative around it. Then definitely you have to reference. Like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, great example. They're actually going up and giving proof against the Holy Roman See and the church and the history books. So they have to give references, but that's a historical fiction, historical non-fiction book. So it goes a little bit different. For fiction, you don't have that at all. Does that answer your question? Yeah, great. Any other questions around that, or either type it in or say it, and if not, then I will look at some of the other questions that I have. Okay. Someone who asked, I'm an experienced author, but I've never written, okay. Someone who's written blogs, an experienced author in blogs, but never written a book. And they've heard this theory that you can take blogs to books. And can you take blogs to book? And what I'm getting from that question is, and they wrote it in earlier, so I'm not sure what they're referencing there, but blogs to book is actually a great way to do things. You're testing your material, you're testing your audience, you're getting to see if people like it, and you're building your marketing. I'm assuming that that question also means, because usually the follow-up is, why would somebody buy the book if they can read everything for free online, right? And I'm seeing some people nodding that, like, great question. How many of you actually own something in your home because you love it so much that you could have gotten a free version? Or how many of you, let's say even a better question, have paid more for an article of clothing or something in your kitchen or a piece of art that you didn't have to buy, but you just love it so much? Great, actually, you know, here's a great example of it. How many of you have a band t-shirt that you went to go see the band perform and then you bought the t-shirt? Yeah, so I'm seeing so many hands. You are willing to pay extra for something that you don't need, but you love the experience so much that you're willing to pay more to have a memento of that experience in your closet or on, you know, to remind you of how you felt. So that's actually the great thing about blogging or putting your work out. People actually want to have a nostalgic piece. And there's also that reciprocity piece. People actually feel like if you've given them free and more free, Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a online marketing guru, actually has a book called Jab, Jab, Right Hook, which I don't like that it's like hitting people, but the premise is that if you're giving people little pieces of you consistently, then when you come in and ask them to buy from you, they're happy to, because they feel like, I got so much value out of the first hits, which you know, the first few times that he gave me information, I would have paid for that. But now, because I got those for free, I'm willing to pay the thing for the thing. I'm even willing to pay a premium for the thing. So blogging a book is a great way. You vet, you grow your audience, you establish your voice. That's one of the best techniques. And I will say, in fiction, you have something called flash fiction. But then there's also fan fiction, where you're giving parts of your story, chapters of your story one at a time, and they do build on each other. Because that's the hard thing with fiction, is if you just give a small snapshot of the grand story, how does someone know where they are in the book? But there are people who run fan fiction sites, and they have their audience, and they're back for more every single time. If you're writing nonfiction, it's a lot easier because you can write each piece as an article or as a it's not connected to the other pieces necessarily. And you're getting people to really love your voice and love what it is that you're writing. So definitely blog a book is a great way to do it. Yeah, so you do this all the time with music. You can listen for free in many places, but still buy an album or download, on Apple Music. Yeah, and Fight Club, Jab, Jab, Right Hook. Yeah, and here we are, Right Club, Jab, Jab, Right Hook. But no fighting in Right Club. Though that would be kind of epic, because we would be fighting with the mightiest tool on the planet. The pen is mightier than the sword. So we are actually here fighting for our words, fighting the world. Exactly. Any other questions in relation to putting stuff out as much as possible? Yeah, get it out there as much as possible. I mean, the greatest writers have written. The biggest part, as we've seen through this whole Right Club journey, is being seen, not letting the voice of the opposition, that itty bitty shitty committee that we have in our brains, that in our heads, that we all have, not letting that voice win out. And by keeping you small, by keeping you silent, by not having you speak and write and put your stuff out there. There are so many unknown authors. There are so many authors that nobody will have, and brilliant, genius authors that nobody will have ever heard of because they haven't had the opportunity or they haven't had the courage to let their voices be heard. That's the biggest struggle. So if there's one thing to take away from Write Club is like, get your stuff out there right now, write, get it out, and then write on, continue to write. Publishing timelines, could you speak to this? Yeah, do you mind just clarifying what you mean by publishing timelines?
Yeah, like from the place of, like there's traditional publishing. You talked about the different types of publishing, and I feel like kind of that DIY style would go much quicker than perhaps a traditional publishing. I guess I'm kind of curious, like how does that kind of roll out, like that kind of flow?
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
100%. Yeah, thanks for clarifying, because yeah, that's a great question and really does need to be clarified. Traditional publishers, and I'll give you a tiny little bit of a teaser of the history, though I could geek out on the history for ages, but I won't bore you with all the details. And like I said, I do have other courses that I give that dive right into that. But traditional publishers in the olden days, there was no fast printing that we have now. There was no laser printing. So in order to publish a book, traditional publishers would actually have to create a print set and do a print run. So obviously by the time they've created all the print set, that was so much work at the outset that it didn't make sense for them to then only publish a minimum amount of books. They would invest in the print set, then they would publish 20,000, 30,000, hundreds of thousands of books. And then they would give the author an advance on the royalties. And so sometimes when we see that in the movies, we hear like advance on the royalties. Oh my God, you're rich. You got paid $100,000 for your book. It's an advance. You're not actually paid if you don't sell. So it's an advance on the royalties. Now you can sell copious amounts of your book, let's say, but you don't get any earnings back until you've made the $1 above that advance. And so that could take, the whole point that the publishers would do that for authors is because it would take the better part of a year to create that print set, to print it, before they created the print set, to do the editing, to do the formatting, to do all the technical, all the production side of the book creation, do the print set, send it off. And yeah, it could take upwards of a year. At the same time, they would have the company's marketing team and the PR team and everyone else on hand. And the author would start getting booked on traditional TV and radio shows. They would use that advance money to start working on the marketing. And I've talked to so many editors, old school editors who were from that world. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, an editor would be paired with an author and they would work like a tight unit, getting that book to the best that it could be over 3 months, 6 months. And then slowly the industry started changing, and an editor would have a second and third and fourth author on their desk. And slowly but surely, it started to be that the editor was under these timelines saying like, hey, turn this book around. And they wouldn't even talk to the author and really understand that author's voice. And they started to be really pressured to really produce as much as possible. And that would take a long time. And so today there's not really a single answer around how long a traditional publisher would take. Again, there are, as I said, there are so many places, so many companies that call themselves a publisher, which are not one of the big 5 New York publishers, one of the traditional publishers. And you can always tell whether it's a traditional or not, because the traditional will pay you versus the ones that call themselves a publisher, but you pay them. They're actually a hybrid or a I'd like to call them self-publishing assistant. Now, not to say that they're dirty players or that's something wrong. There are mid-sized publishers that do pay you or that don't necessarily pay you, but you don't pay them. You know, there's a very variety of options in between there. And they do take longer than doing it by yourself. By yourself, that is, you have as much flexibility and expediency as you want to take it. You want to go hard, you could bring your book out. I mean, within 72 hours, you can put your book out. So it's a lot of work, but, and that's why a lot of you hear a lot of these things like write your book in a weekend. The premise of that is that either you take all your blog posts for the last year to write your book in a weekend, or there's another service that is provided where there is free content that you can purchase. And I see you're laughing, but this is true. And I've been to those marketing pitch workshops where they tell you that you're writing your book for the week in the weekend, and they teach you how to write your book in the weekend. And then at the end of the weekend, the Sunday night, they say, and if you didn't write your 35,000 words, we have a service where we buy content for you and put it together as if it's your work. And it's completely, you know, creepy, icky to me. Now, some people may choose that option, and I'm okay. That's okay. But there are, just to let you know that exists in the industry as well. There are websites for, you know, that you kind of like stock photos where you buy a membership to that platform. And just like with stock photos, you buy a membership to that platform, and then you could choose whatever photos you want. There are content websites where you buy a membership and then you can choose the content. And I can always tell when somebody has done that with their book, because I recognize it from somebody else's book who also did the same thing. So yeah, I don't advise that at all. But that went on a different tangent. The timeline is, yeah, publishing timelines. Traditional is a lot slower. It's not as flexible. You can't pivot as easily. DIY, you could pivot very easily. You're very flexible. You could put it out. And of course, there are lots of people who also make a lot of money on selling only digital books, ebooks, and those are the fastest. KDP or Amazon Kindle came out with something called Vella, which is kind of like a telenovela. It's short books, only the digital, and they're doing very, very well in the marketplace right now. So that's a very quick turnaround to publish. So all, you know, really here you have every single shade of gray, like black, white, every shade of gray in between. So, you know, the world's your oyster with this. So there's not a, you know, there's not one answer, except to say that DIY is much faster. Traditional is going to be much slower. Does that answer your question? Awesome. So I got another question. Medium, I'm assuming you mean medium.com, which I highly advocate. Medium.com is a article writing website where the more people read your article, you have the potential to get paid for it. It's not the only one. It is the one that I recommend, though. It's the sort of up and up, and it keeps a good presence in the marketplace. Like, people still really like Medium articles. It has a high caliber. And yeah, you can go on. It's essentially like a blog writing website. It acts just like WordPress. You upload pictures. You can choose some of the search engine, like some of the SEO for your article, and you can write articles about anything. And they get shared, and the more they are read, the more you get paid. And it's actually a great source of monetization for your work. So I highly recommend it. So yeah, thank you for asking that. There are others, and also while I'm on this topic, one of the things that people actually don't know is that even in Kindle, so in the Amazon KDP, there's also something called KENP, which is the Kindle edition next page. So the more someone reads your digital book, you actually get paid from this KENP fund that diversifies into how many people and how long they've stayed on your pages. So that kind of works like a medium as well, where as they're on that device linked to that website, you get paid more the more they read. So that's why people who are actually doing very, very, very well with this actually sell more, monetize more, I should say, in their KENP than they do in their KDP book sales, which you're going, what? How does that make sense? How can they? What they do is they price their book at a very low price and make it so racy, let's say, or so tittillating, or so sensational, or so many open loops, and really easy to read that someone is kind of invested in going to the next page, going to the next page, going to the next page. The book didn't sell for a lot, but the author is making more on KENP. Now, this is also, we're at the stage of that where it's that becomes fiction serialized. The sweet spot for that is 50 books. These are authors who have 50 books that they're just writing. People are hooked on these stories. They're hooked on turning to the next page. And but I do know quite a lot of authors who are making a very nice living, a very, very nice living, only selling digital books for a very small amount. And people think, how much can you make off of those books? I mean, after all, even if you're selling at 99 cents, I mean, how, you would need to sell hundreds of thousands to make such a great living, but no, they're actually making it on the KENP. So it is a possibility that a lot of people don't know about. Typically, how long are these books and what genre? So great question. And I will say 100% romance and erotica are two of the biggest ebook and KENP sellers. And I said that and every single one of you went, of course. Erotica, just found my future career. I know, fun to write, fun to read. And every single one of you just got a chuckle when I answered that, which genre. It is true. That being said, sci-fi holds that big market share in that as well. And also adventure, and that kind of cross between sci-fi adventure, like that deep space, dystopian speculative fiction, that whole world. Flash fiction does really, really well in this. And how long are those books? Yes, so they're very short. They're written very specifically in order to open loop, to create so much tension. They actually don't follow the Swift model or what I've been teaching you here, where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. They actually don't follow that. They follow more like a Netflix show, that you feel like you've gotten to the end until the very last few minutes, and they leave you with such a cliffhanger that you go, oh, well, now I've just got to buy the next book. I can't be left with this. But notice that that's actually something that's coming into our awareness, that previously, like classic books, we didn't see that. So Harry Potter series does that really well. Twilight series, Hunger Games series. I mean, we're seeing serializations that previous to that, I mean, we did have serialized books, for instance, Nancy Drew, the Babysitter's Club. I mean, we had seen books that have a serialization, but today we're really affected. The medium is the message, of course. We're really affected by Netflix or that kind of binge culture, where we don't actually, there are a lot of books that don't actually have an ending to them. That being said, I don't want to make it sound like that's a bad thing. The very, very beautiful 1001 Nights was written in the exact same way. And the 1001 Nights has a beautiful story whereby the king, the sultan, was this megalomaniac, womanizer, sex addict, and he would take a new wife, and as soon as he would bed her, he would kill her in the morning. And it was very well known that if the sultan fell in love with you, expect to die the next day. And one day the sultan noticed the daughter of his vizier, his right-hand man, his lieutenant, and he said, he caught her, she caught his interest, and he said to the sultan said to his vizier, "Who is that?" And the vizier said, no, you, not her, not her. And the sultan said, no, she's going to be my wife. And so the vizier took his daughter aside and he said, the sultan likes variety. And so I'm going to save your life because you're my darling daughter and I love you very much. You must provide him with variety to such a degree that if you tell him a different story and leave an open loop, leave a mystery, leave a secret at the end of the story, at the end of the night, that he has to listen to tomorrow night's story, then you will live. And after the 1001st night of storytelling, the sultan turned to his wife and said, I have enjoyed these last 1001 nights so much. I am deeply in love with you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And she went on to live a long, glorious life telling stories. So open loop is quite a classic tool. Another little tidbit, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, the story of this boy who goes in search of gold, is one of the stories from 1001 Nights. I love the expression. So that, let's turn it back to the KDP and being able to write these short stories or these small stories with open loop, very, very powerful. And look where they can go. So let's not limit our thinking to thinking that those little short ebooks or Velas are somehow not real books or not taking to the degree that start, middle, and end. Let's look at it. Let's widen our view and say even those short stories have the power to become great sagas. And specifically to answer your question about how long are they, not very long. There are ones that are 20 pages. There are ones that are 50. Again, there's no hard and fast rule. With Vela, there is, though I don't quite remember what the maximum word count is for Vela. And yeah, Cozy Mysteries or Agatha Christie, Murdoch Mysteries. Yes, great examples of serials. Yes, exactly. But again, in those days, the book, when it ended. There wasn't an open loop for the next one. What we're seeing today is that you're hooked to come into the next one. In those days, it was like, I just love this book so much. I love this writer. I love this style. I love the genre. I'm going to pick up the next one. Today, it's like it's a talent. I have one friend who does this really, really, really exceptionally well. You cannot read one of her books without purchasing the next one. And it really is, it's an addiction. It's binge, it's binge reading. But then again, Outlander, Game of Thrones, I mean, there are many examples that have done this really well. So any other questions about the traditional publishing models? Tips on how to do that. Sure. On how to create books, many books that have open loops. Do you want to just unmute and clarify your question there?
Yeah, just tips on how to make. Sorry, that's why.
No problem. It's
tips
like
on how to make one, chapter flow into the next. Like I've always been a little baffled by that. It's probably not for me, but I'm just wondering if you could kind of like, I don't know, do you have any nuggets or hints on how to do that? And if not,
amazing.
okay.
Yeah, sorry, continue. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, yeah, that's all. Thanks.
That's okay. Perfect. I love that question. And I love that it's a family, like it's an interactive experience. I absolutely love that. So we've all seen perfect examples of that. And so to give it by example of using an example, I mean, I can't think of one show that I know that we've all seen, though I can say we've all probably seen those shows on Netflix that it's like, we can't wait for the next one. The open loop, and it's not a teaser. Like in movies, you have a teaser for the next one, but the movie itself has encapsulated, it's finished. You feel like it's finished. With these shows that they're doing or the books that they're doing, what they've done is they've created so much tension, whereas in a full book, that tension comes in around halfway to 3/4 of the way through the book. Create tension, create tension, create tension, create tension. Then there's the release of the tension, the denouement, the release, and you get some closure with it. What they're doing here is that they actually end the book at the place that another book would have been about. You'd still have another 1/4 of the way to read. So they're actually ending it what feels like short. Now, in the old days, if you would end it there, and someone would have to go to the library or to the bookstore or to the corner grocery to buy their next softcover book, they would feel gypped. Like, that's not a place to end it. And they wouldn't go back to get it because it just wouldn't work. But because today, the link to the next page is right, or to the next book is right there on the last page. So that's the trick, right? I see your face going, ooh, yeah, that's the trick. The link for the next book, hyperlinked. So someone's reading this on their Kindle or their phone or their tablet, and right then and there, they can click to the next book and purchase it, or I should say, purchase it and download it immediately. They can even download a preview book, a preview of that book that shows about 5 pages of that book, and they make that so racy that even if you were just thinking, I'm not going to buy the next one, but let me see how this ends, they don't actually end it in the first 5 pages because they understand that the look inside the preview of that book, that you're still needing to build tension. So then you buy the book, the release, the climax from the previous book happens just after the look inside. So now you've purchased it, so you can actually have access to the full book. They finish that on that 6th page, but then they right away go into new climax, new drama. So now you're like, well, I've already paid 99 cents for this book. I might as well read the next 10 pages. But they build drama so quickly in there. And then there's a link for the next book at the last page of that one. So it's a continuous cycle. So
how does this work with different age groups? So like, I'm thinking historical fiction, kind of middle school, high school age group. Like, how do they fall into some of this as well? Not from a place of like trying to manipulate anything, but do they, like, is that a part of their thing that like really gets exciting for them? Like, does that keep them moving forward? How are parents feeling, like, with, like those kinds of things?
Great question, because it does get into strategy.
Yeah.
And really this is YA in this sense falls kind of under the same thing as children's books. YA or young adult, so that category, that age group, doesn't have access to their own payment system. So usually that age group isn't actually reading things on their Kindle or on their iPhone or on their iPad. And we all know it's really hard to get kids of that age to read anyway, right? I mean, that's a lament that every parent has. But they're not necessarily in charge of their spending. So same thing with children's books. Like children's book is a really hard market to get into because who actually buys the book? The kid doesn't go into the store with the buying power, the credit card in hand. It's the parent or the grandparent who's making the decision. And in a children's book, what are they making the decision based on? Well, their nostalgia, right? The same thing as the t-shirt of the band, right? They're looking at Dr. Seuss going, oh, I remember reading this to my child, or I remember my parent reading this to me. And so it's very hard to get into the children's book market because the people who are the end users, the actual customer, are not the ones buying. And you do hear about some huge success stories of children's books that the kids just come back to the parents saying, I love this so much. But that's very creative marketing on the part of the author. Or first time, do you notice how many celebrities write children's books? Because it goes back to, again, the parent going, oh, I love Jamie Lee Curtis. I'm going to buy her book. I love John Lithgow. I'm going to buy his book. I love Madonna. I'm going to buy her children's book, right? So it's, again, it's not the buying power of the child. So same thing with YA. They're not necessarily the ones that would be having the sovereignty or autonomy, the financial autonomy to click that button at the end. Now, if they are a person who's a reader and they come to their mom or dad and they say, am I allowed to click this and get the next version? The parent might say, you're reading? I'm happy to allow for that. Sure. Now, if the child comes back 20 minutes later and goes, oh, can I get the next one? The parent might say, and it might trigger some skepticism for the parent about what this is. Now, the parent might read it and think, oh, well, this is great. I love that my child reads this, and I don't mind paying 99 cents for another version, as long as the kid is reading. I'm happy. It's cheaper than buying a $19.99 book at the bookstore. But just from a strategic marketing standpoint, it does get a little bit hard because the people who you are targeting to read it aren't traditionally people who are reading it on the device that you're targeting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what okay, I'm really asking, my husband is a language arts teacher in middle school, and he just has been working on lots of different things. But his big area of interest is historical fiction, and
Right.
Historical fiction for that age group. And he knows what they're reading in the classroom, what's working, what's not working, what stories are ready to be told, like the kids are hungry for, kind of thing. And I know that in the classroom, they still use books, like physical books, which is really cool.
Yep.
But I'm not sure, like, what are they using at home, and where's that, some of those dances, like, are there ways to kind of enter into that a little bit differently? Digital devices and stuff like that with that.
Yeah,
Curiosity.
Yeah, and I will say, it moves away a little bit from the focus of Write Club, but I don't mind at all sharing. I will say that I actually feel my finger on the pulse of where the future is going. We know that Audible or audiobooks has taken the world by storm, especially with lockdowns, and audiobooks by far outsell print books. And obviously for adult consumption, not as much for children's consumption or YA consumption. I will say though, I've got my, bet my bottom dollar that video books are going to be the next big thing. So if he starts writing books that then can be produced to have an animation sequence with it, that will be the way that the next generation is going to be ingesting. And I'm not knocking it. I mean, when we were kids, we would read Shakespeare and go, I don't get it. And then we'd watch the Romeo and Juliet movie and go, oh, I get it now. And that's why they keep making new renditions of the classics, the Shakespeare and everything, because it really is a new way. I would say for your husband, if he finds an animator or some sort of animation sequence that tells the story and then has an audio narration, whether it's his voice or he outsources that and puts that on YouTube, then other educators, other teachers, and other, they will show it in their classrooms as part of a historical fiction. The same sort of part of the educational, the
like unit, kind of like,
right, exactly. Part of the curriculum.
Language. Yeah.
Curriculum, that's the word I was looking for, right?
It
Part
is.
of the curriculum. That even if it's told even if it gives fictionalization, then it's still accurate historically, then they'll use it in the curriculum, and he could have a great little series with that. And then he could also have a compendium to that of the published books, and Scholastic would pick that up, and especially from an educator, there's a lot of and I will even say, Scholastic may pick him up even without that video element to it. If he just wrote those books, Scholastic might pick him up because he understands the market, and if he writes it very well, obviously. But if his end goal is to get that age group to really be interested, then I'd say like the video book is the way to go.
Okay, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah. He likes to write things and try it out in the classroom right now already, like has been for years. It's kind of fun. So I'd be curious what else he's working on.
Yeah, and you're getting a few people
text it away.
Yeah, you're getting a few people excited about that prospect. So I think it could be a really cool thing, a really cool new concept.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm just love historical fiction. Many teens love it too. Such a great way to inspire an educated generation. Exactly. And what about graphic novels? Yeah, Natasha, exactly. That's another example. We've seen sort of that anime manga storyline really take off. So a lot of, and of course, Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Captain Underpants, right? And then there's another one, Sisters, for instance, where it's graphic novels, but not necessarily comic books. It's a completely different genre, and the kids are reading those like crazy. But it even more so goes to speak to that visual effect. Kids are really interested. It's not that they're not reading; they're just not reading. They're not reading the way that we used to read, and that's okay because there's new things being invented for that then. Right? And it works in one classroom, it will work itself into the curriculum. Exactly. Yeah, great point. And I love that the way this conversation has gone in this Ask Me Anything session, because what we're really looking at is, it's not just about the book. It's not about the book. It's about thinking beyond the book. It starts with a book, and then the book starts to open the doors and starts to open the windows that previously were only walls, and now you're starting to see that there's actually a whole world that writing a book actually facilitates, like this huge expansive universe that each one of you in this room or watching in the replay afterwards has. If you've just pulled out one thread of this rug, you have your place in this tapestry. There's place for each and every one of your styles in this tapestry. So don't try to lump everyone in or hear somebody else's work and think, oh, I can't do that, or look at the success that she's had with that or he's had with that. There are so many mediums today that are available in the community of humanity. Exactly. There's so many avenues and venues and ways to do this that are available today, that each and every one of you has the potential to start tapping into that market and be the unicorn, be the first on the scene, be the goat, the greatest of all time in that scene. And people will think, wow, how did he or how did she come up with doing that kind of style in that kind of platform? And it'll look like genius. And all you've really done is actually taken a classic concept and paired it with a new emerging technology or a new emerging platform. And the two together become golden, just become an access to something really great. So I love how this has actually opened it up for a bigger thought. Exactly. Different thoughts on how to actually start to market your book. And I absolutely love that, because as we're coming into the end of this session of Write Club, look for the need and meet it. Bonnie's saying exactly. Find your space, your space in the ground, your niche in the ground, and to create from there. The biggest impediment to being really successful is hiding your work, is hiding your writing, is not writing because you've convinced yourself that somehow you've convinced yourself that not writing, that you're not ready for writing, or that not writing is somehow superior to writing. And I'm here to tell you, start writing, start giving it, letting it see the light, because your writing actually comes from the light. You actually receive this writing from an enlightened space. And so taking in that light and then leaving it in the dark is a disservice to whatever it is that enlightened you. Whatever inspiration you got, you need to bring that back out into the world, because the world needs your light. And with that, write on. See you next time.